Hey everybody, welcome back to Trekyards. I'm Captain Foley,
I am Commander Collins.
and we have a special guest with us today. Would you please introduce yourself, sir?
Hello, this is Alan from Resurrected Starships. Jolan True.
Perfect intro. If you guys haven't checked out Resurrected Starships on YouTube, go over and subscribe. He does some fantastic stuff and breaks down battles and looks at ships from like FASA and Starfleet battles. Stuff I really like, and I think you guys would be interested. So I'm a huge fan, and this is his first collaboration video, and he approached us because he wanted to talk about Romulan ships in particular, because he's a bit of a Romulan ship fan.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and specifically the Romulan fleet from Picard. So it'll be interesting to get his thoughts on things.
And we have looked at all the individual ships throughout the season, but this is kind of like a timeline of all of them and get the unique thoughts as well. Because who the hell knows, we might totally change our opinions.
First of all, tell us a little about the Romulan ships. Like, what do you like about Romulan design specifically, and why did you want to talk about the ships from Picard?
Well, actually, I've been a diehard Romulan fan since I was a kid. I think like maybe the second Star Trek episode I ever saw was Balance of Terror. My second favorite Star Trek ship after the TMP Enterprise is actually the Romulan Winged Defender that FASA designed. I saw that fleet. I'm like, oh, that is so glorious. I think Garrick said, "Oh, the Romulans don't really have an artistic eye because they don't see colors or whatever." I'm like, "Oh, that's bull," because man, they make some pretty ships.
And speaking of the Winged Defender, he's got a fantastic video on it over on Resurrected Starships. Go check it out.
And there's 3D stuff. It's not just stills, it's 3D stuff. But, episode 1, we were treated with a Borg cube, but more importantly, a Romulan ship, a brand new one, in one shot.
But a glorious twisting shot.
It is.
Turnaround shot.
Almost the promise of more. You know, it was our first new design. It was interestingly done. It showed good cinematography. It was black. Well, it was green, but then later on it was seen black in the hull, which was confusing. And in fact, I emailed John Eves and asked who designed it, is the ship green or black? Because it looks black from inside and there's no light source. He said, oh no, it's green. But you can tell the VFX people made it black. And considering the later ships, one's grey, which is not the Romulan aesthetic at all. So, what was your thoughts on the first ship we got?
I was very excited about the first ship. It was sleek. Obviously it wasn't what you would normally call a warbird. It was very, it was small. To me, it was sort of a scout ship or fighter or warp shuttle or something like that. It didn't have any nacelles, so it didn't strike me as being much of a full-blown warbird, but little did I know what they were going to have later. We'll get to that later. But my first impression of that was pretty awesome.
I really enjoyed the wing design on that, how it went down and then back up. Like, it was a unique kind of new thing, and I thought, okay, if this is what we're going to be getting, that's fantastic. And then like you said, later with the fleet we get at the end, it's kind of like, where'd all this go? Like, this is such a unique, interesting design, and it's not even seen in the fleet that I could find anyway.
Well, the problem is, as we see in the hangar shot, you can see inside the cockpit, and it's maybe two or do you see the two chairs? It's a freighter. It's not freighter. It's a transport ship. So you wouldn't send transport ships that are relatively small in the final battles. That does make some sense, but the ship did seem to disappear, especially with other flying around bits. I mean, they introduced a snake fighter for some reason, and this would have been absolutely...
My thinking, I wasn't sure about the color, but I figured it probably was green, but there's something about the way Picard is shot that there's a lot of specular lighting coming from these models, and I don't know if that's the CG itself or the material on the model, or if it's the lighting in the scene, but it seems like there's just a lot of specular backwash coming from all the ships in Picard. So it's hard to tell what kind of color they actually are.
We didn't see this one that much, so I mean, we'll move on to, I guess, the next one, and we'll might come back to this one if we need to. But so the snakehead fighter that we see, first of all, I mean, Romulans are known for their bird aesthetic generally. So the name snakehead really threw me off. I get that it's shaped like the head of a serpent or whatever, but is that something that bothered you, that it wasn't a bird aesthetic and was referred to as a snakehead?
Well, I'll tell you my thoughts on that, but to get to that, I have to backstep a little bit on the Romulan shuttle. It had no nacelles, right?
Yeah.
And if you go all the way back to Deep Space Nine, that Romulan shuttle, every Romulan ship we have seen up till this point has had nacelles. It seems like that's one of the rules. Like, we have sort of kind of rules for Starfleet ships, and one of them is that they have nacelles. It seems like the Romulans have a similar kind of rule. So now we're in the Picard era. This Romulan shuttle or transport has no nacelles. Maybe it's not warp capable, and then we have...
No, it's warp capable.
Well, that was my initial thinking.
Yeah, it's warp.
But now we have this fighter that's also warp capable with no nacelles, the snakehead fighter. So to me, it breaks the immersion a little bit that neither of these have nacelles. But that tells me if we really want to geek out and get into headcanon, that perhaps they're using some different kind of warp system than they had in the past or something like that.
Well, this is where the furious typing on the keyboards in the comments section come in. Well, everyone knows that the Romulans have the quantum singularity drive, and it's obviously different. Yeah, but it's still it's a power source. Exactly. It just provides the power for the warp nacelles. You still need the warp nacelles to build the warp bubble. So,
and we've seen Romulan ships at warp. They have the exact same warp effect as everything else. So every major race shares the same warp style. And yes, this could be new. Obviously, then later ships. I mean, the Lesserina has the same warp effect as the Romulans, so there isn't any particular differentiation there. In terms of warp nacelles, there is one ship that doesn't have warp nacelles in the Romulan Armada. It's the Romulan Flea from Enterprise. Obviously, that was a redress of a Voyager ship, but they did heavily detail it. So that is an example of they're trying to hide their intentions and therefore not having the nacelles. They were capable of non-nacelle-based warp travel, but given how many ships in all of Trek, the technology does exist. It's just safer to have nacelles, and so having anything internal, Delta Flyer is very, very internal. So if on the shuttle, if the original shuttle was designed just to be, they're in Romulan space, and there wasn't a huge sense of urgency in any of the scenes around that base. So it was just while special, an average sort of posting. It wasn't really, So I can see it having, maybe up to warp 5, something pretty general. As that tech is hundreds of years old at this point, you can, just like phones and such, you can get that tech into something very incredibly small. You don't even need line of sight like the Defiant. It's safe enough. So I'm not hugely worried about that in particular.
And the level 12 nerds will also chime in and say, well, the Klingon Bird of Prey doesn't have nacelles, and that may have actually been a Romulan ship too, if you really go dig into the apocrypha of that ship. But the thing is that ship could get away with it because it was one of the most badass ships we'd ever seen. So it's like, I'll give you a little bit of leeway on the Klingon Bird of Prey because it is so damn badass,
Well, the Ferengi Decor hasn't got conventional nacelles either. I don't think nacelles are necessarily a quantifier, but yeah, you're right. It's just the fact they have always had them and so don't.
Well, as Samuel and the viewers know, I'm a big proponent of the fact that is a Romulan designed ship, as it was originally intended to be for Star Trek 3. Yeah, not all ships have visible nacelles. Even the La Sirena has things all over the place, but really, are there nacelles? We don't really know. So
if they could have worked something like a nacelle into the contours of the ship, maybe some sort of fin assembly or something that you could say, that might be a nacelle. That might have worked a little bit better for me.
There's a checklist of things you need to add for spaceships, especially in the Trek universe, and they're slightly different for each race, but they do apply. All these Romulan ships sort of ignore some of them, and you think, well, why no visible warp nacelles? Why no visible glows? Why no windows? Why no... there's a whole checklist of things. Why no visible weapons? Why... all these things, and all these ships just, which then takes us into the snakehead, which is... is that a Romulan aesthetic designed to you?
I'm okay with it. The snakehead... One thing we saw, if we go back to Star Trek Nemesis, the scimitar was kind of a departure from most Romulan ships, except you could still kind of call it is Romulan-ish because it did have that sort of bird-like appearance. But and the Scorpion fighters as well. But I'm okay with the snakehead. I don't. Let me have a look at the thing.
and disclaimer: the scimitar is Riemann designed, not Romulan.
I don't think that the Riemans by themselves... That's a debate we can get into another time.
That sounds like a video we could do.
Yeah, I don't think that the Riemans have on their own, the industry to build that whole big battleship. It's not particularly memorable. it doesn't really do a lot for me that makes me go, ooh, that's a really cool, badass Romulan ship. It's it's just a ship. It's just a ship for the plot.
And I think if you remove the green and put in a lineup, you wouldn't say Romulan. You just wouldn't. I mean, they're functional fight. I mean, the insurrection, flyer doesn't look like Federation either, without the pennants or the glows. So there are things you can do functionally that are different. But this ship is more of a joke ship, in the sense that you get that scene with Ursa where they say, they're at the edge of our sensor range. And it's like, no, you can see them. They're right there. The whole scene plays out absurd. I know it's obviously a reshoot, something added to the plot, but the whole thing makes it look daft. And he's carefully monitoring them, even though he's not cloaked, right next to them. And it's like, the fighter is. It almost feels like the whole thing was like. Because I mean, this almost feels like a rush design. If you include Narek chasing them as a reshoot, we need to add Riker and such in, then this could have been John saying, okay, here's a fighter. And like, okay, great, we'll build it. Okay, it was one day, cool. Now we've got.
To me, the only thing that makes a snakehead Romulan is a little bit of green aesthetics on it, and other than that, it could be just any generic.
And I'll be honest, if I made them red and green, had pennants, you can make that a Federation fighter.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Off the insurrection thing.
Well, that's the problem with Picard though in the ship design. It's very not thought out well. I mean, if you look at the rest of the Romulan fleet, there's no nacelles on any of those ships either. I mean, the one ship from the Romulan fleet looks like Hawk's fighter from Buck Rogers, for crying out loud. Looks very much like a bird. And then you got the other one, the big baddie, which, again, if you look at the ship, it has no nacelles. You look at the back of the ship, and it looks like generic sci-fi. There's lots of thrusters and red and green ports. And what's the nacelle there? Like, there's no design aesthetic put into these ships.
But Stuart, speaking of unique design aesthetic and Trek feeling, the next ship is the antique Bird of Prey, which does have warp nacelles and does have a Romulan aesthetic.
And thumbs up, man. That's straight out of Starfleet Command, the game. I mean, it's the TNG era, or not the TNG, the TMP era Bird of Prey. It's awesome. I love it.
I was really excited to see that. I think. Also in this era of Picard is when everyone was still pretty much into it, for the most part. I don't. Of course, the original was more like the color of the Enterprise, so it's not an original Bird of Prey. It's definitely maybe a Mark II original Bird of Prey, some sort of upgraded design from that. Maybe a refit era Bird of Prey, TNP era, something like that.
Yeah, that's what we assumed as well. It definitely fits that mold.
Well, Stuart knows one of my pet peeves is that people saying, oh, they've took a TOS, look, it's a TOS Bird of Prey. I'm like, it's obviously not the TOS Bird of Prey. They wouldn't take a 200-year-old design and, that's too much. There's obviously versions after that made. Every piece is different. So if you refit and redesign every single piece, it's not the same ship. It's so yeah, a TMP would be fine, or TNG. I just hate people saying it's just the original visually updated, because of Discovery they can just visually update anything, but it's not. That would be absurd. Although obviously in the show it's defeated incredibly easily. So I mean it could be meant to be. But antique could be anything, I think, after 50 years. A lovely design. Although it is very much just a trailer bait and a fan bait. It could be any ship. The ship means nothing in the episode. It's completely nothing. But therefore they thought, why not give it this? And it's like, okay, great, cool. You did a good job.
I would have loved to see this ship as Picard's ship, not La Serena. Maybe...
Bold choice.
Yeah, well, maybe in some earlier version of Draft, it's like, I've got this Romulan connection. And they show up on reveal. It's an old antique Romulan ship, and they're gonna fly around in that thing, and that would have been awesome.
That would have been kind of cool. He does have his Tel Shiar, housekeepers, so there's his Romulan connection.
But I think this design is fair to say did everything right. I mean, even such as reinventing having the impulse on the wings looks great. Something about it just works well.
That's right. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having the impulse drive on the engines. Even the nacelles actually have line of sight on this design, if you're going to go back to the old Andrew Probert rules. But yeah, it's probably the best ship in the series. I mean, let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's both a faithful update, but also an update. And it would have been nice to have that be an important part of the episode. I still don't really buy that two low grade ships can burn through its shields. I mean, Lesserina's a cargo ship, and the other corvette is destroyed in 2 hits. So I mean, it's not not exactly a high class ship either.
That. Then we get to later like I was saying, the ships that look like birds, literally, and then the big baddie ship, which is supposed to be like a warbird. Like,
well, they're all called warbirds. They're all called warbirds.
I know, but it's supposed to be like on par with the Pterydax or something. Like, it's not even anywhere near the size.
No, it's definitely not. But if you go from that bridge shot and come out, that bridge is what, maybe, how many meters across would you say the bridge is?
Yeah, it's not big.
Maybe 15 meters across?
Yeah, if that, yeah. Yeah, it's...
So if you line that up and take it sideways, if you were willing to do this experiment, the whole ship probably isn't much more than 200 meters. It's not, maybe 300 if we're being really generous. Maybe less than the size of an original Constitution class. It's definitely not a Pterydax, which is 1,300 meters.
All of Jada Trek and all of Discovery Trek has been bigger is better. Every single time. And so them being small, some of the Federation ships, they weren't big. You can tell the Federation ships are actually very small relative to the most powerful fleet ever. And so it was kind of nice.
It is a departure from the largesse doctrine of Romulan ships, of their warships. Everything in TNG we've seen so far, and the Scimitar and the Valdor has been really big. So it is a little bit immersion breaking to have this flagship be so small. And maybe there's reasons for that. Maybe because Romulus was destroyed, they don't have the resources to maintain these big bad ships anymore.